On the day of our 6th anniversary, I learned exactly how much a secret costs: $8,462.19 before tax, handwritten in a neat loop on a glossy receipt that slid out of my husband's jacket pocket and landed in my palm like a dare. I wasn't snooping. That's the first lie I told myself. I was doing laundry, being helpful, following the little rituals that make a life look tidy from the outside. I shook the sleeve, the paper fell, and in the 2 seconds it took my brain to register jewelry store and platinum ring, my heart ran a marathon and collapsed at the finish line with its hands over its head, panting, terrified, brawled. I told myself not to be that woman, the one who stares at the stranger's handwriting and tries to read her future in the ink. But I was absolutely that woman, clutching a receipt like a lifeline, ears ringing, body hot, thoughts sprinting ahead to the scene where he kneeled down at dinner, tell me he had been a distant idiot for months and wanted to start over, slide a ring I hadn't asked for onto a finger that had been waiting for something I didn't have the nerve to admit I wanted: proof. You'd think after 6 years of marriage you wouldn't need proof. You'd think love would be self-evident, obvious, loud enough to drown out the other noise. It isn't. At least not for me. Not for us. We weren't broken, we were misaligned. He was 44 when we married, I was 25 and roll with hope. People said I was smart to marry a steady man, a builder, a provider, a person who read contracts instead of horoscopes. He was careful where I was impulsive. He liked plans and calendars and efficient car routes. I liked ideas that woke me at 2 in the morning and made me feel like I'd swallowed a star. For a while our differences made us laugh. Then they made us schedule things. Then they just made us tired. He had been working late a lot, which was not new but was newly explained by the merger and the new team, and we hired someone young who actually understands our back-end systems, which was said with this blend of admiration and exasperation that I couldn't quite sort out. He came home with the smell of other people's air on him. I know how dramatic that sounds, I don't care. Offices have a scent. Meetings too. You can tell when someone's been in a room full of laughter and coffee or a room full of fluorescent lights and disappointment. He had the first kind of smell on him on the nights he wasn't sarcastic, the nights he texted from the driveway to ask if I wanted anything. He had the second kind on the nights he moved through the house like a friendly ghost. I catalogued it dull and told myself I was studying my own life like an anthropologist, neutral, curious, scientific. Another lie. I was a woman hoping not to be wrong about what she suspected, which is almost the same as hoping to be right about something terrible. Back to the receipt. It was thick paper, embossed, the kind of thing you keep even if you don't end up keeping the thing you bought. The ring had a SKU I could Google, and I did, of course I did. An oval diamond in a slim platinum band with a low setting, practical and elegant, the kind of ring you could wear every day and never bump against a sweater and irritation. I stared at the picture for so long I started to imagine how it would feel on my hand, its weight, its coolness warming to my skin, the private flicker of light when I turned my wrist while making coffee. I imagined the little speech he'd make, how he knew it hadn't always been easy, how my patience had been a lesson, how he wanted to recommit to the ordinary magic of us. I imagined making a joke about recommitting to the dishwasher too, because humor is how I smuggle my needs into the room without sounding needy. Then I put the receipt back exactly where it had fallen, as if the fabric of reality could be folded up along that seam and pressed smooth. For a week I was high on hope. I set the table with our wedding crystal for random Tuesday pasta because it felt like training for a happier life. I answered his text quickly. I softened my sarcasm before it left my mouth. I convinced myself that his long, distracted looks weren't distance, but preparation. He was nervous, I decided. He was doing that thing he does before big decisions, where he rehearses in his head 100 times before the words come out. I touched the base of my left ring finger when he wasn't looking, practicing the choreography of surprise. This is the part where you might start disliking me. He didn't promise me a gift. He didn't promise me anything. I constructed a narrative out of paper and breath and handed it a crown. I told myself I wasn't that woman, the one who stakes her sense of being loved on something shiny. I told myself the ring was about partnership, about being chosen again, not about the number on the receipt. And then I practiced what I would say to my friends to make it sound modest, unspoiled, chill. It's just a simple ring. We wanted something classic. I hated myself a little for caring. I hated myself more for pretending I didn't. Our anniversary came on a Thursday. I took the day off work and made a dinner I had no business attempting. I seared scallops and lit candles and put on the dress he liked from the year I turned 27, the one that made my shoulders look optimistic. I had a playlist on low and a small gift for him, nothing flashy, a framed photograph from a weekend at the coast where We both looked like a version of ourselves I was afraid we were losing. He came home late and kissed the air near my cheek. He thanked me for the effort and poured himself a drink without asking me if I wanted one. He talked about emails while standing in the doorway, jacket still on, looking not at me but at the table as if it were a technical problem he needed to solve. I told myself to be generous. I told myself I was being needy. I told myself a lot of things while the scallops went from perfect to overcooked by the time he actually sat down. There was no box. Not even a small bag tucked into a larger bag like a decoy. He gave me a card that said something kind and correct, and then he looked at me the way men look at women when they want the moment to be over without having to say the thing that would end it. I smiled until my face hurt and told him this was lovely, and it was, in the way a dentist's office is lovely. Clean. Efficient. No blood on anything that shows. I didn't ask about the receipt. I kept thinking, maybe the real moment comes later, when it's just us, when he calls me into the bedroom with that lopsided grin and does something cheesy and perfect in mine. He fell asleep on the couch halfway through a documentary he'd picked because it would keep us from talking. I took off my dress and hung it back on its padded hanger. The shoulders looked tired. After that, I began the part of the story where people decide whether to feel sorry for me or slap me through the screen. I didn't confront him immediately because I wanted to give him a chance to tell me the truth by himself. That's the noble version. The stupid version is that I wanted to catch him in a lie I could hold like a trophy. There's a mean little streak in me that admires precision even in betrayal. On Saturday, I put on my normal clothes and went to the jeweler alone, heart thudding in my throat, telling myself I'd just browse because I'm thinking about an upgrade someday. I said those exact words to the woman behind the glass because I needed to hear how ridiculous they sounded in my own mouth. She was kind. She told me they'd sold 3 of the exact ring in the past month. 3. Not 1. Not 2. 3. I didn't know if that made things better or worse. It made them messer. She said one had an engraving inside, and I could have crawled across the glass to claw the information out of her, but she just smiled the bland smile of retail confidentiality and offered to clean my current ring for free. I stood there with my naked hands while she polished my life, and I tried to stop shaking. I kept imagining the conversation where he'd explain it was for someone in his family, his sister, his cousin, someone getting engaged he'd been helping because he's the responsible one. It could have been that. It could have been nothing. But then there's a part of me that knows what it feels like when he's keeping something fragile and shiny and not mine. He becomes careful with his phone in a new way. He leans it against books face down. He smiles at corners of rooms. About 2 weeks later, I ended up at an after-work thing for his company because he texted, and I quote from memory, though I promised no direct quotes, that it would mean a lot if I made an appearance. I was not supposed to read too much into that, but obviously I did. It was at a rooftop. I have always felt too poor to enjoy properly with my soft blouse and my loud feelings. He introduced me to people with that proud husband tone that passes for romance once you've been married long enough. And then I saw her. The new one. The back-end system savior. 20-something, fresh and brisk like a new page. She had the kind of hair that makes you think of expensive conditioner. She laughed like bells. And on her left hand, playing in the light like in a compass, was my ring. Not identical. Not similar. 9. The slim platinum band. The oval diamond, low and practical, the tiny surprise of the hidden halo that only reveals itself if you know where to look because some desires are private and you want the dazzle to be just for you. If you don't know what a hidden halo is, count yourself lucky. I didn't until I spent a night memorizing Jewish terms like I was cramming for an exam that would determine whether I got to keep my life as I knew it. I felt my stomach drop in the free-fall way I imagined happens when an elevator cable snaps. I smiled anyway. I smiled and I smiled until my cheeks burned, and I excused myself to the bathroom, where I stood in a bright stall and looked at my own face as if I could find the place where the crack was and smooth it back together. Here's the part where you either pity me or call me dramatic. I tried to talk myself out of what I'd seen. Maybe it wasn't the same ring. Maybe she had her own story with her own man who loved her enough to spend too much on something she'd probably forget to take off at the gym. Maybe I was being petty and small and jealous in a way that made me unlovable. Then I remembered the number on the receipt and the engraving I hadn't been allowed to read, and I thought about how she had placed her hand on his forearm for balance while stepping backward to let someone pass. It was a gentle, practiced touch. People will tell you that you can't read a relationship from a touch. Those people have never watched their husband flinch and then lean in. I didn't make a scene. I went home early, alone, with a lie about a headache that was also a truth. I waited on the couch in the dark, and when he came in, I looked at his face with a confession that might spill out if I stared hard enough. He only asked if I was feeling better. I said something non-committal. I invented a whole language of non-committal those months. Some people think the honest thing is to ask direct questions right away. I think sometimes the honest thing is to see what a person does when they think they're safe. To get ahead of your judgment, I did not behave well. I began to keep a private ledger of what I took and what I was owed. I used his credit card for a flight to see my sister without telling him because I wanted the equation to balance somewhere. I read a year's worth of texts on his laptop when he forgot to log out of iMessage one night. I didn't find sex, which almost disappointed me because at least I could work with the clarity of filth. I found memes, work jokes, gentle encouragements at midnight about presentations and migraines, and don't let them talk over you, you're the smartest person in the room. I found care. A private, constant current of it that did not flow my way. I found a picture of a ring sent to him 2 days after my anniversary with the caption I promised not to quote but cannot forget. I thank you. I promise to pay him back someday. The emoji with the little pleading eyes. In the middle of all this I did something that will make some of you hate me. An ex wrote to me. Not a big X, not a defining love, just someone who knew an early version of me who laughed with her mouth open. He said he'd be in my city for a day. He wanted coffee. I told myself I deserved to be seen by somebody who had no stake in the Cold War at home. I met him at noon, and we talked about everything except the thing I had gone there to talk about. He told me I looked the same, which is a nice lie at 31. He asked if I was happy, and I heard myself give the kind of answer that's really a plea. I didn't kiss him. But I wanted to be the person who could still want something without calculating its cost, and that felt like a betrayal of a different, purer kind. I went home and told my husband that I had met an old friend, and he nodded like a neighbor hearing about new garbage pickup hours. If he had asked one real question, I would have confessed everything. Silence makes excellent kindling if you're trying to burn down your own house. I started to notice small kindnesses in our home that had nothing to do with me. Groceries I didn't eat. Tea I didn't drink. A lavender hand cream in our bathroom that smelled like young. In the mirror, my face looked like late afternoon. I bought a very expensive face serum I couldn't afford out of spite. I made a lot of decisions out of spite. I called my mother and said I was fine in a voice that made her ask me if I was eating enough. I lost 6 pounds worrying. I cancelled plans because I wanted to be home if a confession finally knocked on our door. Here is the part where the story should explode, but instead it sinks like a stone into the thick silt of logistics. Bills still need to be paid in a crisis. You still have to choose between arugula and spinach while wondering if the person next to you keeps a secret child, a secret lover, or both. I did the math on divorce twice, then a third time just to see if the numbers would agree to be kinder. They did not. I looked up apartments I could afford alone. They were all beige in unflattering ways. I told myself I didn't need hardwood floors to be brave. I told myself couples survive worse. I told myself women before me had given up their entire bodies for family, and here I was whining about a ring. I told myself I was not special. And then, because I am both petty and thorough, I emailed the jewelry store and asked if the warranty could be transferred if the recipient wasn't the original purchaser. They wrote back that it could, but the original purchaser's name would be needed for the record. It was his full name with the middle initial he only uses on paperwork. He had made this official. When I finally asked us in, put my body in front of his, and placed my question in the space between us like a hot pan he'd have to move or burn, he did something that will haunt me whether he is innocent or not. He didn't look surprised. He looked relieved. He said he had been wanting to tell me, and then he told me a story with the steady confidence of someone who had practiced it to the mirror. He said the young woman at work was his daughter from a relationship when he was very young. He said the girl's mother had moved away and started over and asked him, long ago, to stay out of their lives to keep things simple, but that the mother had recently reached out because the daughter had Christians and wanted to meet her father. He said he didn't tell me because he wasn't sure how to tell me without making me feel less than, as if my place in his life could be threatened by a new truth. He said he bought the ring because the daughter was getting engaged and could not afford it, and he wanted to help without making her feel like charity, so he did it quietly. He said he had been gentle with her because he was trying to make up for decades and weeks. He said a lot of things that, if written on paper, would look like love for a child. He said the words with care. He used the right tone. He looked at the floor when it made sense and into my eyes when it counted. And I didn't believe him. Not because the story was impossible. Men have secret children the way old houses have secret rooms. It happens more than anyone wants to admit. Not because he hadn't told me before. People conceal things that terrify them. Fear has a logic. I didn't believe him because the math was wrong. He would have had to be 19. He wasn't 19 with anyone. He was building his foundation, as he calls those years, which is funny now that I know foundations can be poured over bones. He had told me, over and over, that he had no children and no near misses and no messy ties. He had told me with the particular pride of a man who thinks he took the responsible path. He had told me I was his first try at family, and I had signed my name under that sentence with both hands. And something in me had felt, for months, the texture of a romance in the way he spoke to her. It was the texture, not the content. The frequency. The softness in his voice like a thumb smoothing down a crease on a shirt before a photograph. He said her name like a prayer, and that, more than anything, made me feel like I was standing outside my own windows looking in at a life where I was the guest. He offered to show me messages, and I declined because I had already seen them and I didn't want to become the villain of his story by admitting how. He said he would introduce us, and I didn't know if I could bear the politeness of that meeting, the way she would look at me, and I would have to decide how to arrange my face around the word daughter. He said he understood my doubts, which is not the same thing as apologizing for causing them. He had the audacity to reach for my hand. I flinched, then felt childish for flinching. I slept in a guest room that night and didn't sleep at all. My mind staged 100 plays in 100 theaters, every version ending with something broken on the floor. In some, she really was his daughter, and I was the cold wife who made him choose between the past he didn't know he had and the present he built with me. In others, she was his lover, and I was the gullible woman eating scraps from a table where I cooked the meal. In a few, I was also guilty of flirtation blooming into a betrayal, or at least the wish for one. In every version, I was someone I didn't want to be anymore. I pressed my face to the flat coolness of the pillow and listened for the sound of his sleep in the next room. It didn't come. The next morning, I did something smaller than brave and larger than polite. I told him I wanted to meet her. He agreed instantly, which felt strategic. If he was lying, he had rehearsed this part too. If he was telling the truth, he had been waiting for me to come around. He texted, she agreed, we set a time. I spent the hours before that meeting rearranging the pieces of my heart into a shape that could survive public viewing. I wore something neutral. I practiced my smile. I promised myself I would not apologize for my existence. We met at a cafe that specializes in coffees I sometimes think were invented to make women like me feel dumb. She arrived in a blue sweater I will never be able to look at on anyone else without feeling sick. She hugged me, which surprised me so much I nearly stepped backward. She smelled like vanilla, which explains the hand cream, and she said she was glad to meet me and that she had heard so much, and then I stopped hearing, because the ring was there, obvious, cheerful, catching the light like a small animal catching a bug. She played with it while she talked, the way women do when they're not used to joy yet. She spoke to him with an ease that made me think of summer. He watched her like a man listening to his favorite song on vinyl, the kind of listening that is about reverence and memory and the way the room changes when the needle hits. He was gentle with her in a way I have only seen him be with me a handful of times, and those times were all before the merger, before the receipt, before I learned what secrets cost in exact dollars and cents. I told myself to be fair. People will say a lot in the comments about fairness. Fairness is a nice word for a game you cannot win. I asked her about her mother without asking anything directly. She answered as if reading a script written by someone who had been in a rush. She said things about the distance and complicated and finding each other now, and at one point she slipped and said we've always been so close, then corrected to becoming close. A tiny word, but my ear caught it like a fishhook. I watched them together and tried to see father and daughter. Sometimes I could. Sometimes it was effortless. He wiped a little foam from the corner of her mouth with his thumb and I almost threw up in my handbag. Maybe some parents do that with grown kids. Maybe I am too prickly to understand. Maybe you are already typing that I am projecting my own bitterness onto something innocent. But then he asked if she was sleeping enough, and the way he said it had an intimacy that rubbed my nerves raw. He says the same to me when I'm stretched thin by a product, and I wanted to be the only woman in the world he said that to like it meant anything. You can call me childish, I won't argue. After, in the car, I told him the timeline didn't make sense. He gave me dates and names and details I cannot confirm without turning myself into a person I would not recognize in court. He told me he was sorry for the secrecy, but not for the kindness. He said he would be ruthless for me in business, but he would never be ruthless with his child. He looked so noble I wanted to hurt him. Do you understand that feeling? It is not a good one. It is not tidy. It is a part of me that could burn a forest to warm my hands for a minute. That night I opened my laptop and searched for how long it takes to get a DNA test back. I read articles about legal consent and chain of custody and the hateful feeling you get when you are researching whether love can be confirmed by a swab. I didn't order anything. I closed the computer like slamming a lid on a boiling pot. Instead, I took a shower in water so hot it turned my skin new, and I made a choice I knew would disgust some of you. I decided to wait and watch. I decided to be the calm eye of the storm, collecting data, filing it under case, which is not a word you want to apply to your marriage, but here we are. I decided to keep sleeping in the guest room for now. He offered to move to the couch. I declined because I wanted him to sleep with his back to the door of our bedroom and feel the shadow of my absence like a draft. A week later, my period was late. I didn't tell him. I bought a test like a teenager and peed on my future in a drugstore bathroom because I couldn't bear the thought of that little one getting an audience in our kitchen. 2 lines. Printer clear. I pressed my palm to my lower belly in a mirror and whispered something to a person who wasn't there yet. The ground under my moral dilemmas shifted so quickly I had to grab the sink to steady myself. Money versus feelings had been an equation about rent and a used couch 30 minutes prior. Now it was about a nursery and college and whether I wanted my child to inherit my talent for pretending things were fine long after they have rotten through. I went outside into bright noon and watched people do ordinary tasks with their ordinary hands, unaware that a stranger on the sidewalk was holding an earthquake in her pocket. I told him 2 days later because the secret had become too heavy to carry without changing my posture. He wept. And this is maybe the cruelest sentence I will ever write about him. I didn't trust the tears. I watched him crying and did the awful math we all pretend is beneath us. Will a liar cry like that to keep a thing? But a good man cry like that because his life was too full of love. Then he put both hands on my cheeks and said our child, and I saw the flare of a future I hadn't allowed myself to picture in months, the late night fees and the tiny socks and the way men soften in the orbit of a newborn as if gravity had been recalibrated, and I wanted to forgive everything if it meant I wouldn't have to do any of that alone. The girl daughter, colleague, lover, mirror, problem, person texted him the day after I told him. He smiled at his phone in the kitchen where I could see but not hear. He typed fast. He set the phone down, screen down, and missed the second buzz. I looked at the rectangle of withheld truth like it was a creature we should both stop pretending wasn't living with us. I asked him, in the kindest voice I could manufacture, to tell me whether he was in love with her. He said absolutely not, and then he did the thing men do when they are telling the truth about the wrong part. He over-explained the other parts. He talked about duty and history and opportunity and making up for lost time. He did not talk about hormones. He did not talk about the way she looked at him as if he were oxygen. I hear the chorus of reasonable people in my head even now. What do you want from him? If she's his daughter, he owes her care. If she isn't, then you should leave. Pick a lane. But lanes require roads, and what we have right now is more like a swamp. You can get stuck anywhere ankle deep or gone. There were small, sharp moments that kept me from choosing numbness. Like the morning I found a tiny jewelry box in the garage wedged behind paint cans. It was the same brand as the receipt but empty, the velvet inside smudged in a way that suggested a ring had been taken out quickly by someone's excited fingers. I held the box like an artifact dug up in a backyard renovation. I put it back where I found it because I am a romantic and a coward in equal measure. Like the afternoon his mother called me and asked if everything was okay because he had sounded elated and frightened, which is exactly how soon-to-be fathers sound if they are also possibly about to lose their marriage. I told her the truth I could bear, we were expecting. She cried, and I realized families always multiply their truths along the most fragile lines. Before you decide whether to keep hating or pitying me, I want to confess one last thing. I went to the cafe where the girl works on weekends, not to ambush her but to see her in her natural habitat without him altering the air around her. She was good at her job, brisk, warm, competent in a way that makes people think they've been cared for when really they've been processed sufficiently. I watched her tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear with the same absent-minded elegance I have practiced before interviews. I watched her laugh with a coworker without the ring catching the light because she had taken it off and strung it on a thin chain around her neck like a secret. I felt a bolt of jealousy that made me ashamed and also told me something true. This is a person with her own life. She will hurt people besides me. She will be generous to people I'll never meet. She will be worshipped, and she will be adored, and she will be wrong in ways that will make her older. If she is his daughter, they deserve some version of a story that is about two people finding each other after years of absence. If she is his lover, then I am standing inside an uglier story that looks, from the outside, exactly the same. You want an ending? I want one too. I could give you the neat one where I pack a bag and walk out to applause from the part of the internet that loves clean lines. Or the other neat one where I forgive in a blare of grace because the baby deserves a family. The truth is uglier and more alive. I am still here, but I have moved my heart to the doorway. I told him I needed DNA tests, and he told me that asking his daughter for one would humiliate her. He said if I trusted him, I wouldn't ask. I told him trust without verification is religion, and I already have one of those. He said I was being cruel. I said I was being careful. I don't know which of us is right. Maybe both. Maybe neither. What I know is this: I have a new ring on my finger, a simple band we bought together the week after we saw those two lines. It cost less than a third of the other ring, and I paid for half because I didn't want to owe him even the weight of metal. I wear it as a promise to myself that I will not pretend ignorance is kindness, that I will not teach my child that love means overlooking what strangles you. I have started therapy, which feels like learning the language of my own spine. He has started cooking dinner twice a week without asking how, which is either penance or love. I don't yet know how to tell the difference. The girl sent him a picture of her hand holding a paper coffee cup with the ring on the chain around her neck. He showed it to me without commentary. I stared at that little loop of light and thought how everything precious hangs from something thinner than we want to admit. Maybe in 3 months I will come back on here and tell you that we got the test, that the math reconciled, that the story folded along a seam I hadn't seen and made something almost beautiful out of lies and timing. Maybe I will tell you I left and that I have never slept better, even with a newborn. Maybe I will tell you something worse, that I stayed, that it wasn't his daughter, that I swallowed the truth for the sake of a mortgage and a stroller that stares like a dream. I don't know. I am asking the question every morning, what cost can I live with? And here is the part that will divide you. I know it will, because it divides me. Sometimes, when I watch him sleep, I feel tenderness so huge it pushes every other feeling to the corners of the room. In those moments I could believe he is incapable of the uglier version of this story. Then my phone buzzes with a late-night Slack notification from his team that lights up his face in the dark, and I see the way his mouth softens when her name appears, and I think, even if she is his daughter, I don't want to be married to a man who keeps his gentleness somewhere I can't reach. If that makes me selfish, so be it. If it makes me wise, I will take the insult anyway. He says she's his daughter. He says he was only helping. He says he kept quiet because he was protecting me, protecting us, protecting her. But here's my last, sharp thought that I can't stand down for your comfort. A secret is not protection if it requires me to bow to it. If he wants a fatherhood that rewrites our history, then he can have it out loud, with the test and the truth and the contract we make next. If he wants a love that lets him be that gentle with someone else and calls it righteousness, then I will not be the altar he prays at. Call me cruel. Call me naive. Call me brave if you're feeling generous. My hands are open either way. I am ready for whatever burns.